evening. I'm Mel Antler. I'm here with Beverly Keeley and Keese-Kelly. Sorry. Welcome to our first virtual artist walking tour. If you've been following along, you know that traditionally when we do these things, we're all on location away from each other. But this is the first time that Beverly and I are able to be in the same place at the same time, and also in the place where her work is hanging here in the Ewing Township Municipal Building. Her work is here. The building is open every day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, 8 to 4. So please feel free to come and take a look at the work for yourself. Thank you for joining us tonight. Without further ado, we're going to start talking about the work because Beverly is a unique artist to us thus far. She's a folk artist. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means that she has not attended art school. Big deal, right? When you see her work, you will be amazed. It's beautiful and wonderful and intriguing. And you can see I have my cheat sheet of things that we're going to talk about tonight because when we were here yesterday doing the walkthrough, I had a million questions. So let's talk about where you came from, where your art started, because I think that's a really important part of you as artists.
Absolutely, Mel. Born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey. My parents were from South Carolina. They were sharecroppers.
Oh,
they were sharecroppers and descendants of slaves,
right.
Enslaved individuals.
Yes.
My great-grandmother was 105 when she passed away. Yes, so she
still
told
amazes me.
Yes,
to hear that number.
There's many stories from South Carolina, from the Gullah country,
right?
That were passed down through the years. That those stories were shared and retold and embraced. And I think I embraced them in my art when I did my art.
Mm-hmm. So I know that this quilt behind us was made by your grandmother, correct?
Yes,
okay. Yes. And yesterday when we were talking about quilting as a tradition and in Black culture and as other cultures, that's when you were like, oh, well, my grandmother made this quilt, which is why it's so significant. So tell me a little bit about it. Like, how did you acquire it?
Absolutely. This quilt was a utilitarian quilt because it was actually, made purposely and used to keep the babies warm.
Okay.
So functional.
Okay.
Functional quilt. I know a lot of the antique quilts have stories told inside of them, but this is possibly a story of fabrics that were around my grandmother's home, which she would have known how to sew by hand, by machine. My mother was a seamstress, so I'm sure she was taught by her mother how to sew, and she passed that down to me. So when my mother went home to be with the Lord, we went down and collected some things from the home, and I was avid to bring this quilt back to Trenton, New Jersey.
Nice, very nice. So that's something that we share. My grandmother was a seamstress. She did not pass that down to my mother. Unfortunately, my mother was like, no interest. All I ever wore was handmade clothes. I hated it. It was such a treat for my sister and I, but different generation. But she never did this. My mother actually quilted, though. She worked with a group of women, which is the tradition, right? Everybody works together on the quilt, and they made baby quilts for everybody.
Awesome.
So
absolutely,
this specific space that you put together is really representative of the African American journey, at least from where I see it. Because it has so much symbolism.
The stories from down south, they call it down home, and just like you said, the symbolism, the activities that would have went on there. We have our cotton sharecroppers. We have our tobacco sharecroppers here, represented by these figurines that I do, and these are other things that my mother loved. And I think when you grow up in a family with there's always stories, there's always things going on. You kind of pick up on all the things that your parents are interested in. And my mother loved birds. So I believe that, when I put this piece together, I call it the East Trenton Goldfinch, the neighborhood I grew up in, because there were all types of birds. Even now, when I'm in, where I live now, there's all types of birds flying through the neighborhood. So birds are, one of the things you'll see depicted. We have a young man here who was going fishing, and of course, the ship represents the transformation from Africa to America.
This is a really cool piece. And the nice part about having you here this month, of course, is that it is African History Month. So the timing worked out. For those of you who don't know, sorry, I'm off camera. Beverly is a member of the Ewing Arts Commission. And for years, we've been like, Beverly, we want to hang your work because your work is so cool. And then COVID hit, and we haven't been able to do anything like this before. So when the timing finally started to work out, we were very excited. And February, just timing wise, worked for everybody. And we were like, wow, that could not worked any better to have your work, which is so rich in the African tradition. So we're going to take a walk down the hallway and look at some of the pieces. Like I said, I got my cheat sheet. So don't get motion sickness as we walk. So this is the Muni. If you've never been here, this is the Ewing Township Municipal Building. Walks kind of slow so that nothing goes crazy. Okay, so this is, if I can do this in a nice way. Okay, so here's some of the pieces that I wanted to share with our audience tonight. Oh, we have a question, I think. Sorry, this is going to be a very awkward view of me. Nice. Thank you for attending Central Jersey Performing Arts. Let's see if I can get this up a little bit better there. So Beverly has a series. Here, I guess I can spin, do a little bit of a walking tour. The four ladies is how I refer to them affectionately. They're interrupted briefly by a fifth lady. Here she is. And then these are the other two ladies. When we were talking yesterday, whoops, I keep kicking the tripod, I apologize. When we were talking yesterday, we were talking about like your love of fabric and the sort of, I don't want to use the word symbolism again, but the meaning behind the fabrics and how they tell the story of the individual.
Absolutely. The fabrics are a favorite of mine to incorporate into my art. Some call it fiber art, mixed media. I take this fabric and I piece it together like the quilt that you saw in the hallway. And it brings that those traditional African patterns into the art so that you can immediately see that that's what's being represented here. And so with the fruit baskets on their head, they are representing our Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters who live in that region.
Yes, and I think it's important. Oops, I'm trying to keep this beautiful. Love the addition of 2D, 3D. Thank you for that comment. I think it's important to sort of realize, and Beverly and I spoke about this yet. I'm just going to turn the camera slightly so you guys can see the other pieces in the hall. My camera's being slightly uncooperative. I just want to just briefly mention that when we spoke yesterday, we were talking about how African peoples were being not just transported here to this country, but to various locations
throughout the Atlantic.
And that a lot of the fabrics that you used, and you mentioned it, excuse me, really represent the different areas and the different sort of cultures that were, again, a bad word is assimilated, but that sort of got folded into the melting pot.
Absolutely.
And so there's some really beautiful, I'm going to see if I can do a better job carrying this thing around without tripping over it, because each one of these pieces is really quite unique. So each fabric, and just like the quilt that you mentioned, right? The beautiful qualities. I'm going to come back to our fifth lady in just a second. Here, that's a good look at that one. Each one has sort of a unique sense to it, but they all carry the multimedia quality. It's a little hard to see on camera. This one might be a tad bit dark because the light bulb is out over it, unfortunately. But each one has a very unique quality, and the mix of the fabrics, the piecemealing of the fabrics as well. And they're really, really lovely. When we spoke yesterday, I'm going to let this sort of sit. Come stand next to you if I can get it to behave. Come on, tighten up. Might go a little south on us. Oh, that'll work. Okay. So yesterday when we were talking about the representations, one of the things that I brought up was that there are women, that you don't see men in your pieces that are hanging there, except for the gentleman in the cabinet who's doing the tobacco. And further down, let's look at those ladies. Sorry. Hope nobody's motion sick. It would be me on the other side being motion sick. There's these three ladies right down here. And this one in particular is one of the only ones that has identity. And by identity, I mean facial features. So I already know the story, but I would love for you to share with people at home what makes this one special.
Absolutely. I wanted to begin a series that had what Mel just said, identity. People, in my immediate family who I want to represent. And I have three lovely sisters, and I want to attempt to depict all of them at one point in time. But this young lady is the only one that I've finished with at the moment. And she is named Judy's New Dress. And this one came together, again, mixed media, a summer camp excursion with some children. I was asked to help with the paints and, help clean up after them with the paints. And the bodice, as you can see, is just a bunch of paint splatter. And I couldn't clean that up. I couldn't leave it there. I couldn't see me throwing it out in the trash. I didn't know what it would become when I brought it home back to Trenton. But it became Judy's New Dress. It became the bodice with this African skirt, again piecemeal together, like the quilt, like the quilting. So it was very fun to put this together. So her sisters will be doing her sooner or later.
So one of the things that you and I kind of chuckled about as we moved down here, just to take a couple peeks at some of the abstract work, was something, and all artists that I speak to say this, that just like you said, oh, I saw this amazing bit and I knew that it had to go into my collection, that I didn't want it to get thrown out, that it had value, even though at the moment it didn't necessarily have a spot.
Absolutely.
And we all do that. And when we walk down here, you guys are going to see some of the other amazing things that she has collected. So this is part of that series. It's not Judy. there's another in that same series. Okay. So the abstract pieces, this one I feel like we need to share because I'm going to move this back. See if I can get the camera to behave. This one is a little bit different. And yesterday when we talked about it, you made some comments about how you feel about abstraction.
Absolutely. You kind of, start, but you never really finished until you just walk away from it and you're pleased with what you see left on the canvas. Because you can go one day, you can go 2 days, you can go for months, but I believe it here in this piece, I knew what colors I wanted on the canvas. And I had to keep coming back, and I think I came back for maybe a day or two before I was able to leave it alone and be satisfied with what I saw there. And the abstracts aren't something I do often, especially with acrylic paint or any paint, but I wanted to at least attempt it and continue to attempt it because I'm looking for different ways to come up with the background for the collages. But I have other pieces similar to this and similar colors, hoping that one day they'd all be able to be hung together. And abstracts for me are one of those things that I have to really take my time and, put more energy into. Everything else is kind of more natural.
I think that is a great comment because Joy Creeves, thank you, Joy. Joy Creeves is also a Ewing artist.
Awesome.
Wrote a little note saying she's
Awesome.
enjoying your work.
Wonderful.
Joy, wait till
Thank
you see what we have next. These are like you're gonna love these. Okay, I apologize. You guys are getting a very odd look at me. But so here's one. Okay. We were talking about your comfort level with abstraction,
Yes.
and I said, well, there's these two pieces. This is
Mhm.
one. I'm going to move down slightly so folks can see the other. Here's the other one that I felt like these, even there are abstractions, have a much more like I don't want to say
they're in my comfort.
they're in your
zone.
comfort zone. Thank you.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
After sewing, and I have lots of friends who sew as well, and they're always bringing me little bits, bringing me little bags of the bits of fabric that they've made outfits with, and this is what's left over because they know I like to sit and make little intricate designs with the bits and the pieces. More or less piecing them together like again the quilt.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these two in particular, as I mentioned yesterday, they have a certain aesthetic that I find incredibly pleasing. Let's see if we can get a good shot of that. There we go. The colors are really harmonious. The multitude of patterns, everything just seems to really feel congruent. And I think you said it it's in your comfort zone, whereas the straight paint may not necessarily be yet. I'm going to say yet. But you mentioned when we were looking at the abstract painting that you make those things thinking at some point they're going to be incorporated into something else.
Yes. Yes.
So do you spend time sort of dabbling around with paint?
I do. When I go into the studio, there's times when I'll grab a package of canvas and just maybe paint all of them. And then as time wears on, they kind of speak to me about which fabrics would best go onto the canvas.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. So it starts out as a paint on the canvas first.
Right. Giving yourself a base.
Yes. Then later on, that's where the artwork takes place. So I'll start attaching the fabrics. I'll start attaching whatever it is, mixed media, found objects. Layers of
Yeah,
what have you. texture to add to the canvas.
Oh, and I think this is a good segue to the pieces in the other hallway.
Absolutely.
Because, again, I'm sorry, folks, you're going to get a very weird look at my forehead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn the camera as we walk so that you can see the other pieces in the hallway. I'm trying to trip over the camera like I did a minute ago. Because there are some other collages here in this hallway.
This one here, Better World, is done mainly in paper. Absolutely love layering the paper just as I would layer that fabric and not feeling that it has to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's times when I'll mix both the paper and the fabric together, but this one is mainly done with paper. And then there's some organic material as well on there.
Yeah.
To bring about, the theme of the, woodsy type thing that I was going for.
Oops. Doing a bad job as a cameraman. I apologize, guys. But we do have, is this the one that's the print? No, that's the next one. So a couple more in the hall. I'm trying to do a better job.
Path.
Yes.
As I begin to make prints of my work, I notice how it just kind of melds in. So you really can't even tell which are fabric and which is paper once the prints are made in it. And the shadows, it makes a really cool shadow and layering effect behind
right when it's
piece.
When it's an actual three-dimensional thing, it's really evident. Like you can clearly look at it and say, oh, this is this, this is this. The print has that mind-bending quality of what's real and what's not real. When I first looked at it, I didn't realize it was a print because the textures and the things that I see, I was like, oh, these are the things that she uses in her work. So I just accepted them as the actual objects, not as a reproduction of them. So this is a little different.
I also like to stencil every once in a while. I'll feel like a piece needs more work, or more layers, more textures. And just like I would layer those fabrics, I'll layer in some type of stencil as well.
Nice. That one has great color too. We didn't really look at this one yesterday because I was so enthralled with the others. Nice.
And as you can see, I love the yellow. I love the variations of the yellow running through all my work.
Yellow. Oops, there's Joy again.
My favorite color.
How long have you been making art?
Oh, my mother was an artist and maker, and I believe that was always our go-to for fun, is to go and make something. So all my life, I'm going to say, because that's all we played with. You know, I was
constantly
for children,
engaging with your materials.
Yes. So whenever winter hit and there was you had to come up with things to do.
Right.
It was always art. It was always crayons and paints and
I
things
know
like
you
that.
have children. Did you do the same thing with your kids?
I did.
Nice.
I did.
And
but not everybody's going to pick it up. And they pick up pieces of it, and then they express it in their own way.
Right. They make it their own.
Yes.
Now, I know you have a couple grandkids. We're going to walk. I apologize. It's going to be a little bumpy. We're going around the back of the museum here.
And there are 2 hallways of work.
This is a short one.
Get a chance to come out and see it. Make sure you visit both hallways to see the different series.
Okay. So this hallway, I'm just gonna, everything's taped on the floor. Directional walking here. But this is the hallway that has these little pieces, and I want to make sure I get a good shot here because we had an entire conversation yesterday about the history of fabric and the symbolic like there was symbolism in certain fabrics, one being denim. So I'm going to quickly just show you the denim piece hanging here. Then we're going to come back and talk because I think this one is important.
This piece is indigo, and enslaved individuals would have taken the flowers, the indigo, and turned them into dye, and the dye was exported along with cotton to make fabrics overseas, and then sent, back to us as fabric, as bolts of fabric. Yes.
And we talked about denim specifically yesterday.
Yes.
And how it has
evolved over the
exactly.
centuries.
It's had its own cultural revolution.
Absolutely, it has its own cultural revolution. Yes,
but it did start out as a utility
fabric.
Yes.
For farmers, for workers.
Yep.
And then turned into, a hip fashion.
Exactly.
Both cultures really embracing it, as fashion and using it for its own fashion statement.
Right.
Which we kind of all share, the same viewpoint of the denim today.
Yep, and it has continued to evolve. Bev and I, so the camera will stay put. Never thought about a fabric as having its own history. Yes, I'm sorry. Beverly and I were kind of joking yesterday because one of the things when my mom was growing up, and probably you and your mother, right? No jeans, no denim. But
back in their day probably held a negative connotation.
Exactly, because the roughnecks wore denims, bikers, those crazy bikers. But then when I was a kid, that was all the rage, right? And I shared a story with Beverly about my grandmother coming up for my high school graduation and not like surprised to see everybody wearing denim, and had like her revolutionary moment of yes, like it's fine, everybody can wear denim now, like it's a thing. But she was really old school.
Yeah.
And I was joking with her, she didn't wear pants until I was a teenager. So
yes, we were not, it wasn't a welcome item in our house, and I think we all can go back to times when we were younger, that, there's something that mom or dad did not want you to have, they didn't want you to wear that.
Well,
it could have been the mini skirt or
exactly
something like that.
Right, there was some piece of clothing.
Some piece of clothing that was off the.
Yes.
Yes, they weren't going to buy it, but we snuck and got it.
Exactly. I saw something on television the other day about jeans, and they went through like the history of jeans, probably on PBS. But they started talking about Calvin Klein's, Gloria Vanderbilt, and there was another one. And I clearly
Sergio Valente.
Yes, and I have memories of literally lying on my bed and zipping the pants because yes, they had to be that tight. And we're just about the same age, so
I got the hand-me-down.
The only reason I got
my sisters because I was buying them, and my mother was still buying my clothes, and she was not going to buy me a denim.
That's right. So I do want to look at these pieces that have the variety of fabrics in them because one, I adore them. I know it's not about me, but
absolutely. There's that defiant denim again, which I kind of run through a lot of my pieces, because it's a fabric that's a part of, my growing up. And, it has meaning to me as far as the evolution it had in my home. And so I've mixed it here with lace, which would have been representative of when you're sitting down at a dining room table and everything's so prim and proper.
Right, formal.
And formal.
Yes, very formal.
Yes. And then we have the burlap. in the back, which would have been representative of the sacks that the cotton was placed in, you know, that made all of this fabric, that put all this fabric together. And then here in these pieces, I decided to use playing pieces as a multimedia additive, just to give it a little, you know, give the story a twist, you know.
And something I mentioned yesterday, the whole piece really, like the frame, you know, this kind of unique thing on the top, three-dimensional quality of the frame, the muted color, that really does pull the whole thing together. And just those tiny little bits of blue, you know, to yank our eye around within the composition. And I know
it's done on a stone washed denim in the back.
Oh, is that what that is? Oh, I didn't realize that.
You'd be able to pick it up a little bit more in the other pieces because they're done a little bit more on the surface.
Okay.
This
next one, it's a little more, it's easier to see. This frame is not quite as deep. But here, it's the, is that acid wash jeans?
It's an acid wash, yes, in the background.
This looks like those acid wash jeans. I want to say from the 90s. I don't know. My fashion history is poor. I'll admit that. But the addition of the guitar pick kind of adds a little classic element there. Makes me smile. And then the last one, just on the far side. So I noticed that like texture is really important. Well, actually, I don't want to say that it's really important. Are you conscientious of textures?
Yes.
Are you thinking about it?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely want to give it as much texture, as much party for the eye as I could possibly give it.
I think that's a great way to say it because when we talk about composition and we try and, oh, we got one more. We try and think about what the viewer is going to witness in our work. Let's see if this one will cooperate. There we go. You know, we think about the places in our composition we want the eye to visit, and what will we use to pull the eye around? How will we do that?
Absolutely.
So when you're like, you know, dancing around, right? That is the unconscious voice saying, how can we keep the viewer with us?
Yes.
And this one, actually, all of them have that nice, like, ornate quality, and the mix.
Those are found objects that I'll go around and through my thrifting, through my yard selling, through my flea marketing, I come up with these amazing frames, and there's times when I just can't wait to use them. Can't wait to use them.
I know that. I'm going to see if this thing will be nice to us. Of course not, but I'm going to put it in front of us and we'll walk. We'll try not to get anybody crazed. I can walk and let you be on camera. I know that as artists, you know, we're constantly, just want to share this one. We're constantly collecting and searching and thinking about where something can have a value, where something can find a home.
Yes.
And that process of collecting. And I know so many artists, I said it earlier, it's like, oh, I know that. Oh, that could be something somewhere.
Absolutely.
And
I think that's the fun of it. You know, not knowing what's going to happen with it next.
Right.
But just, you know, you can find treasures in your own studio. Because you're like, I got something, you know, I got something I could use with that.
I always think, like, I know I have my own little personal piles of goodness. I'll just say it that. How do you keep track? Like, what do you do in your studio? Do you color code?
I do have containers.
Okay.
and I do keep like items together.
Okay.
And I have to because it gets crazy.
Like I have my little drawer of fabrics. I'll admit to that.
Absolutely.
I have my drawer of fabrics, and in the drawer, everything is rainbow coordinated, much to the chagrin of other people in my household. So
with this series, I
definitely want to talk about these because
I'm a silhouettist. And with this series, I wanted to depict the traditional way that folk back in that time era, that century, would have been there before cameras were, before there were someone to sit down and actually, take your photograph. You would have had a silhouettist cut out your likeness. And it was framed, and that was one of the ways that you were
it could be represented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this young lady may not have had her photograph done it in a silhouette, so I wanted to make a few depictions of individuals who were representing that time era, and would have sat for a photograph, for a silhouette.
There's 3 on the side, and then there's a couple more on the other. I feel like each of these is, to a certain extent, check my lens here, its own character. There's a certain specific quality to each of them that really makes them ring as true individuals, not as attempts. Does that make sense? Like they look like they're based off of real people.
These people come to me. Okay. They come to me. I start with the paper, and when I begin to cut, they show up.
Okay.
They're not anyone.
You find them in the paper.
Yes, they're not anyone that I've known before. I meet them after I'm done cutting.
That is interesting. That idea that the individual will reveal itself. So that is number 2 female, untitled. Now, before I forget, and this one, I don't know if you guys can read the tag, it says not for sale. But before I forget, I do want to point out that I'm going to turn the camera so Bev and I can see you guys. I know the camera's just going to slouch on us. Oh, there it goes. Stay still. Most of the pieces are for sale. So her information is hanging on the wall. And we may have even had it streaming across the bottom. We're streaming from my phone this evening. So the text is like this big, and I'll just say it nicely. I'm not 18 anymore, so I can't read it from here. But the work is for sale. And Beverly is on Instagram, so you can follow her on Instagram. I'm just going to peek at what the little tiny text is saying. There it is. If you'd like to purchase her work, make inquiries. There it is. Her email address just went across the bottom of our screen. Thank you, Tim. Our amazing Tim Ho of Tim Ho Music is our tech person. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you. All right, so I'm going to turn the camera back around, and we're going to peek at a few more in the hallway here. So we're going to come back to this big piece because I want to show you guys the other silhouettes that are here, that are sort of in the same vein as the ones we were just looking at. There's a little tiny one here. And I'm just going to say it's a man.
Yes, I have several men in this hallway. There are men in this hallway.
The men are in this hallway.
Yes, yes. They've
The ladies get to be
fewer
in the
in this hallway. Again, when I'm out and I find these amazing pieces of wood, this piece of wood was already adorned with this hinge, this broken hinge, and it was already red. And later on, it comes to me, okay, what can I do with this find? And I've placed this silhouette into this find to represent a person, indentured slave that would have been working inside of a barn.
And it's titled Mister's Barn. And that piece of wood does really feel like it came off a barn door somewhere.
Absolutely.
And are you cognizant that you use the primary colors here?
They were already there. They were already there.
Was the blue in?
This was already painted, just as you see it there.
No kidding.
Absolutely. And I just went in and even the down to the nicks and pings and imperfections in the piece, it was what I believe gave it character. So this came together very easily, putting him into that center of the piece. He seemed to belong there. And again, they tell me where they want to go.
Beverly and I yesterday talked about how artists have that secret voice. And that voice, my dad used to paint rocks, and I would always ask him, we're going to come back to that one because there's a couple of those that I want to talk about. And this is sort of a larger piece with a multitude of portraits. Now, these are all paper, yes?
Yes. This is paper on canvas. And it's called Brothers and Sisters. The viewer can go in and tell a story about, I like putting pieces together where the viewer gets an opportunity to go in and see a story. What story do you see? What is it that you pick up from looking at it? Because it could be so many different things going on, so many different time eras, so many different places these people could be, so many different situations they could be in. And what is the situation that you pick up from looking at it? And I went over some of the pieces to give them different colors, give them different shades. African Americans, we are all different shades of Black and brown, and I wanted to make sure that was represented as well. And there's several pieces that I cut, and I cut into several pieces of paper, making multiples of them, so they're kind of scattered about throughout the collage.
I did not catch that before.
Yes, with different paint layers and textures on them.
So I'm glad that you said that you like to have them to be a little bit open-ended. Me personally, as an artist, I think that is hugely important that you give something to your viewer that they can interpret, that they can bring their own sense of self into, and not supply them with everything so that they have no engagement.
So that there's just that one thing, and it has to be that one thing.
Exactly.
Some pieces need to be multiple things.
Yes, and they need to allow for the viewer to project a little bit. And I always talk about that. I'm going to go back to the big one down the hall. Oops, sorry guys, you got a weird shot of my forehead. As art teacher, I always want the kids to ask questions, right? To have that sort of open-ended
Mm-hmm.
feel. I know.
Piece
I
that
might
can have a conversation
Yep.
with it.
see if we can straighten that out. Camera to behave. Probably not. Nope, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about this piece because it has so much symbolism
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much going on with it. Like it's it's
Absolutely.
a plethora of texture and ideas.
Absolutely. I like studying about the different historical events, different, you know, time eras, different things that happened during those time eras, and trying to pull together, you know, when you look at the piece, you can see all the different things that were going on with that subject matter, and being able to put as much on that background to pull together that story of what was going on during that time. I studied the indentured servants and the rice. Uh, they were growing rice. They were, you know, what was it about the rice? What did they have to do to process the rice? You know, so the basket is used to sift the rice. You have the mill. They're holding tools that they would have worked in the field with, and everything else is more for the visual aspect of it. And my love for collage, for that constant layering of paper and fabric, and you know, again the quilting together of the story in the piece.
Yeah, and a lot of your work really does have that whole idea of quilting, bringing the pieces together. And I'm kind of do my best to zoom in here much better than this because you see the word rice. So I don't know how well detailed the camera is, but that is actually rice behind it under there. It's nice to hear you talk about the importance of the historical aspects and the personal research that goes in to your art making. Because you know, art can be seen sometimes as just like a pure expression event, which it is frequently. You know, when we talk about why do we make art? It's a form of self-expression.
And storytelling.
And storytelling.
And you want to, you know, for me, I want to get, you know, as close to, you know, an authentic the story as much as I can when I'm layering in the different, you know, pieces that I've done. This one I've often used wording, scriptures, things that'll help tell the story. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. And that's Proverbs 31, 30. One of my, you know, it's a lot more to that scripture, but this is a piece I pulled out for this young lady, this silhouette. She would have been a housemaid, and she would have been all dolled up, so she looks proper inside the house, and she would have been taught to, you know, that's her role as the housemaid, is to look prim and proper, and to, you know, as she serves, you know, that's going to be, you know, how she's depicted.
Right, she has to meet a specific standard, dressed a specific way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love all the personalities and the stories in and behind the work. I think that's hugely important to the pieces, but not necessarily completely defining. I think if someone who didn't know the stories looked at the work, that they would still see the charm and beauty of the work. Last night when we were here, one of the other members of the EAC came through. Walk in this direction again. Sure, I'm just going to show them what's on the other wall here. I don't want to show everything because I want you guys to come in and see, but there's a couple pieces we didn't talk about, and you guys can come in and look at them on your own. But she came in and she was like, oh my gosh, so many of these pieces just speak to me.
Awesome.
And, you know, whether she has spent time in this space or not, talking about and looking at your work, she wasn't able to necessarily, you know, she was just able to say, these pieces are amazing.
Awesome.
Okay, let me see if I can get my camera to behave here. Okay, stay put. I know my tech guy's going to be like, you're crooked. I'm crooked, I know. All right. Stop carrying the camera. All right. I hope you enjoyed our walkthrough with Beverly this evening. And again, her email will run across the bottom like magic as soon as I say it. Yep. Thank you, Tim. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
I hope you find it awesome. I hope you find it amazing.
And please come in.
I really enjoyed being able to have studio space, especially studio space here in Ewing. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying my art. I love being on the commission.
Studio.
I don't, you know, the pandemic has halted all that. So,
prior to,
you know, it's just me and, you know, my little private space to get away.
Yeah. I do understand that, the need for that.
Absolutely.
So one thing before we do go, I almost forgot. The Ewing Arts Commission works with the Ewing Green Team. And the Ewing Green Team has put together the Ewing Art Survey. And I know a couple of our online viewers tonight are already on the Ewing Art Survey. But we're trying to expand it. We're trying to bring more artists into the survey and get the word out there. So you can email Ewing Art Survey at thegreenteam.org. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly? It's on their website. I'm not saying it. So ewinggreenteam.org is the website. Look for the Ewing Art Survey on there. If you're an artist, register. It doesn't matter what type of artist you are. Register, add your name to the list so that other people can find you. Jim Hendricks, who was our last guest on the virtual artist talk, that's how we found him. So you could be next. I'm just saying. That's all we have for you tonight. Thank you for being with us. I hope you have a pleasant evening, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.